axle. It popped out while I was driving, and I lost drive while I was taking video of trailing this rig. Alright, before we go ahead and assemble the front axle, I'm just going to tell you why I took the front axle apart. As you can see, I've already run this vehicle, and my initial videos of putting this together were kind of frustrating, so I wasn't happy with it, and I decided to do it over again. One of the issues that I did run into when I was running this vehicle was that the pin for the passengers, or actually passenger side, this is a right side drive vehicle, the pin for the shorter CVD axle, it popped out while I was driving, and I lost drive while I was taking video of trailing this rig. And so it was really hard to kind of just three-wheel up everything when one of the shafts wasn't even connected. What I found out was that instead of a 12mm pin that is supposed to be used for the CVD, they put a shorter one, which is around 10.5 millimeters long, and it kept on just popping out of this CVD cup. So what I did was I went and bought these 12mm Red Cat Racing pins. These are 2x12, and I replaced it, and it's a perfect fit for this CVD. So make sure when you get your RC Run kit, when you're putting it together, it'd be a good thing to just slide this sleeve off right here. Let's see if I can do that for you. Slide the sleeve off and make sure that this pin is flush on each side. So you want to make sure that it's flush on each side, and the total length from here to here, it takes a 12mm pin. So just make sure that you check these before you start running it. Alright, I'm going to put the axle back to the way it came out of the box, and then we'll proceed with putting the rest of the front axle together. Alright, with the CVD pins checked and the axle put back together, we can continue with putting together the front axle. Now the instructions for this Run-80 kit are very poor as far as the manual goes, and they're also in Chinese, which I can't read. So I'm going to go over what size screws that you need and which parts you need. So these are the parts that you're going to need to put together the front axle right here. This is a link mount with the panhard mount, and this one will go right here. These screws right here, these are countersunk screws, and they are these are 8mm countersunk screws. So these, you'll need 4 8mm countersunk screws and these following parts. And since we're threading it directly into this cast metal axle, we will need to use thread lock. All right. Alright, with that you shall now have the link mount and shock mounts mounted up to the front axle. Next, for the front axle, we're going to tackle the lower links as well as putting on the panhard rod. Now there's a reason we're putting the panhard rod on early. It's because once we have the axle on, it's going to be hard to attach the panhard rod, especially when the springs are also added onto the axle. So we'll go ahead and add the bottom part of the panhard rod first to the panhard mount and then proceed. So for these lower links, you're going to need 4 M3x16s as well as 4 M3 lock nuts. And for the panhard rod, you'll need 2 M3x12 screws as well as 2 M3 lock nuts. Now the panhard rod has a ball on one of the ends. Put that aside for now and make sure you don't lose it. The ball belongs on the chassis side of the panhard rod, and the bushing goes on the axle like that. So put this ball to the side, make sure we don't lose it. The first thing we'll do is we'll tackle the lower links. Alright, we have the lower links secured, like so. And now we'll add the panhard rod. Like I said, we removed the ball for now, and we'll put that on later. So we'll need to remove one set of screw and lock nut, and we will use the other set to attach the lower part of the panhard rod. Alright, we got the lower part of the panhard rod attached. And you see later on the springs will go like this. They'll sit right there. Just like that. And we'll move on to adding the steering link. Alright, for the steering link, you'll need these two links right here. You'll need a servo horn of your choice. Now, this kit does come with a servo horn, and I am going to be using my own servo horn, and there's a reason why. I do have a aftermarket bumper on this chassis, and because I do have that aftermarket bumper, I had to move certain things. I had to move the servo mount backwards towards the back of the chassis, and the servo horn that comes with this kit is too long. It would kind of run into obstructions during its travel. So I had to use a shorter servo horn, and this is a standard size servo horn. This is from Boom Racing. The one that came with the kit is longer. I think it has 3 holes. I don't quite remember off the top of my head, but it's the same length as these free servo horns that come with certain servos. It's of a longer length than the standard size, and so that was an issue for me, and that's why I'm using this Boom Racing servo horn. Now, the 2 screws you are going to need are one M3x12 and one M3x25 and a M3 lock nut. Now, this is an area where there is an issue with the stock setup. I found that out when I put together this kit initially, and I'm going to be doing it a different way, and I will tell you why. So the stock setup would have the steering link right here go on the bottom of the knuckle, the mounts on the knuckle right there, and the steering link would go on the top of that. Now, the issue I had with this is when you turn to the extreme length right there, this link hits that panhard mount, and you don't get the full throw or travel of turning towards your left. Yes, so your turning left gets hindered when this bar hits this panhard mount right there. And so I'm going to be doing something different. I actually haven't tried it yet. I mean, I've mocked it up and tried it, and it seems like it'll clear. But what I'm going to do is, instead of putting this drag link on top of the knuckle like this, I'm going to be putting the drag link underneath. And so when I turn, it should have the full throw, because this bar now goes underneath that panhard mount and it doesn't hit it. So once again, you see here, let me try to give you a closer look, and I'll just put this screw in here just to you know what, let's use a short screw just so you can see what I'm talking about. This isn't the full length screw that you're supposed to use, but it's long enough for me to kind of show you what happens. Alright, so in the stock position like this, when it's on top and you turn to full left, you'll see that it hits the panhard mount right there, and that's the issue that I was running into. So there, yep, and that there is not what I wanted. Now, so what I'm going to try right here is, instead of mounting it to the top, and this is not the final way that I'm going to mount it, I'm just doing this just for demonstration's sake. If it were to be mounted at the bottom and you were to turn full left, you'll see now that it clears because it goes underneath the panhard mount. Right there, see that? So that's what I'm going to do. So to do it that way, you do have to put the steering link a tad lower, but I think it's okay. I think it won't be an obstacle. It won't get in the way. In stock position, it was already pretty high up already and out of the way. Moving it down a little bit, we'll just put it about right there, and it's still not low enough to be an issue, I feel. So I think it'll be okay. So on this side, what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to double up these links right here, like that. And then you're going to need Loctite, or thread lock, whatever you want to call it. Oh, actually, I think I use a lock nut on this side. So use a lock nut on top. Alright, I had to step away for a bit, for a few days actually, so I don't quite remember exactly where I left off. But I do know that I wanted to attach the steering link. Now, since I did move the steering link lower because I wanted to put the drag link at the bottom of the knuckle attachment, I did have to create a spacer, and I 3D printed a spacer right there. You could use whatever else you have, but basically the idea is just you just want to space it out so that the steering link is straight across. So I actually need a 3x25 screw for this because I want to attach a nut to the top. I don't have one on hand, so I'm using a 3x20 temporarily until I do get some more screws in. But this is I would be using a 3x25 here and attaching it with a nut at the top. So for now, this is just temporary. I'm not going to Loctite it because this is not the eventual screw that I'm going to use. But I'll attach it for now. I don't think, yeah, 3x25 would stick out a little bit more, so I could attach the lock nut to the top of it. I'll just temporarily put it on for now. See if it'll tighten enough to stay. Yeah, it should work for now. Yep. Alright, so now this is how my steering setup is going to look. Just like that. It's going to have this over here, going under that panhard rod mount on the axle side. So that'll clear. Remains to be seen when attached to the chassis whether or not this is enough flex for this drag link right here in regards to the servo arm. Anyway, a closer look at what I've done. Okay. I think I could probably go ahead and attach the the servo horn. I just don't remember which screw it was. It's here somewhere. I think we'll just use this for now. I think this should be it. I'll probably be changing this around, so I'm not gonna thread lock it just yet. Actually, if it's long enough, I'll be using a nut on the other end, but I don't think it is. Yeah, I'll thread lock it. But we'll see if this is going to work out. Looks like it might work out. We'll see. But yeah, eventually you'd want to thread lock that. Okay. So here is the completed front axle setup. We'll move ahead to the rear axle setup, and then we'll go with mounting the front and rear axle to the chassis. Alright, for the rear axle, you're going to need the following. This, of course, is the rear axle. You'll need to find these following parts. And these two in particular should already have the screws threaded in. This one here is a M3x20, M3 nut, M3x16, M3 nut, and these are M3x6 countersunk screws. So we'll go ahead and put together these link mounts first. Actually, these aren't link mounts. These are the lower spring mount. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. And you'll want to apply thread lock. Alright, next we're going to want to put the rear panhard link mount, and this should go like this. And this is the one with the M3x20 screw. And you add the link mount for the other side. And this is the M3x16 screw. And that's how the completed rear axle should look. See here the rear panhard mount and the link mounts. And the spot here is the spring perches for the rear. Alright, with the rear axle completed, let's go ahead and mount up the rear links. So we've got a few links here. Try to measure these for you. Okay, this is the rear panhard rod. And on one end, the screw should be, this is a M3x12. And on the other end, it'll be, I think this is going to be a M3x14. Yeah, it looks like my, so rear panhard rod, M3x12, M3x14. Alright. This is a rear lowered link, and these use, it's looking like, let's see here, M3x16s. So M3x16s with two M3 lock nuts. Another rear lower link, also M3x16 with two M3 lock nuts. These are the rear upper links, and the rear upper links have a M3x12 and a M3x16, I think. Yep. So these are the two. Oh, lost a screw there. These are the two rear upper links, and that's M3x12 and M3x16 with M3 lock nuts. So these are the parts that you're going to need, or the links that you're going to need for the rear axle right there. Panhard, lower links, upper links. So we're going to attach the links first just to make it easy. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We'll attach the links first. So let's start with the lower links. Now with the lower links, the upper side does not use a lock nut, or actually, yeah, the lower links, they actually, both sides use a lock nut, and both sides are equal length. So we'll go ahead and attach that. This. You know what, let me switch that around. Like I said, I've already run this once. The scratches are on top. I actually want the scratches on the bottom, so I don't scratch the other side as well. So let's go ahead and flip that around. Just keep that. Alright, that's one lower link. Grab this one. Yeah, it's like the side. Alright. Two lower links mounted. We'll mount the upper links. Now with the upper links, the lower side has the lock nut, the upper side does not. At least that's how I remember it. Maybe it was the lower side that didn't have lock nuts. Let me see here. I think it was the lower side. The lower side did not have lock nuts. I can see that the mounts here are threaded. So these are threaded and do not require lock nut, unless you want to use one, of course, but then you would need longer screws. So if you could see here, I don't know if you could see in the camera there, but those holes are threaded. Right there. Yeah, here. Can you see that? Maybe, yeah, you can see the threads. See that? So the link riser on the axle. The holes are threaded. You do not need a lock nut. Alright, let's continue. Now we figured out that the correct side, the upper links are the ones that do not require a lock nut. We'll go ahead and thread these in. And since we're threading directly into metal, we will use thread lock. Perfect. So get aside. Alright, we have the rear lower links and the upper links mounted. The last link left is the panhard rod, and this rig does have a rear panhard rod, if I can find it. I know I put it here somewhere. There it is. Okay, so with this one, the side with no lock nut goes on the axle side, and the one with the lock nut goes on the chassis side. Once again, since you're threading directly into metal, you're going to want thread lock. And we'll go ahead and add that. Alright, and we are done adding links to the rear axle. Here's a look at what we've done. We've got the rear panhard rod right here. We've got the two upper links right here. And we've got the two lower links right here. And we're now ready to add the axles back onto the chassis. Alright, before I add the axles back onto the chassis, there are a few things that I do not want to take apart because they're kind of difficult to put back together, but I'll go over what I did. Basically what you have left are the shocks, and the shocks need to be mounted onto the chassis in a certain way. These inner fender wells for the front here, these are 3D printed. I'll put a link to these in the description below, but these are 3D printed. Here you see the front shocks, and the reason I don't want to take them off is because the way you have to screw them on, you got to screw them on with this nut onto the shaft, and in order to hold onto the shaft you have to use some kind of pliers or something to hold the shaft in place while you screw this top on, and that was kind of difficult. I don't want to go through that again, but basically, yep, right there, and it's supposed to move around loose like this. You can see here, this is normal. It'll move around loose like that. That's fine. These are going to be right here. And you also add this cone right here. This is for the spring. It's a spring perch right here. See how it goes like that. So also you'll see this bumper I have on here. This is a aftermarket ARV style bumper. I don't know if I can give you a better look at this angle. There you go. This is a RC4WD 9.5 CTI winch. I'll put a link to this in the description below, as well as this bumper. Now this bumper, in order to use this bumper, you're going to have to make some modifications, not only to the chassis, but to the body as well. So for the body, you're going to have to cut off the pretty much the front bumper below the headlights. On the chassis, you actually have to cut off a little bit of the front of the chassis rails, move the servo mount backwards. You'll see the holes that I use. So these are the holes that I used. There are the servo mounts right there. These are the two holes. And the reason you have to chop the chassis off is if you want to fit the winch inside the bumper, it won't fit if those chassis rails are kept at stock length. So I don't know if you can see here, I'll try and get the light there to show you, but this part is the front of the chassis rail where I've chopped it off, and it's to give room to the winch. And unfortunately I don't have, let me try this. Use my cell phone here to give you some light. Alright, see if this works. And hopefully you can see that a little better. So right there you can see the winch inside, and you can see how this, on this side at least, where that wire is sticking out. If the chassis rail were stock length, it would hit the winch right there, and that's why you have to chop it off. And there's instructions on the site where you buy the bumper that show you where to chop the chassis rail or cut it. I just used the Dremel tool and kind of cut off the front of that chassis rail there. So that's a modification that you need to do in order to run this bumper. Not for the faint of heart. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, I suggest you get a different bumper. Don't use this one. But I wanted it to look really nice, so I just took the leap and did it. Right here on the rear, a few things here. You'll notice that these rear shocks, they have these metal spacers right there, here as well. I didn't want to take these off, but pretty much this is how they're supposed to go. You got the screw going in here in the middle hole with the spacer here and at the top of the shock. Hope that gives you a good look at how that's supposed to be set up. On the lower part where it goes to the axle, you have the spacer here as well. One thing I forgot to mention with this RC4WD winch, I had to remove the bottom metal plate on the winch and just screw it in directly into the bottom of this bumper here. So that's how it's gone. Alright, let's put the axles back on the chassis and wrap up this part of the series. I just had to take it apart, redo that part of the video again because I need to put thread lock, and I was in a rush before, didn't have time to do it, and now I do. And so yeah, we'll go ahead and put those axles on. Alright, so for the rear, first of all, make sure that the drive shafts are in phase. And you know what? I actually don't think these drive shafts go perfectly in phase. Or maybe they do. Don't quite remember, but there it is. That should be in phase, I think. Double check that, make sure it's not this way. Nope, it is this way. Alright, so go ahead, we'll put the upper links on. Alright, the upper links are attached. Let's go ahead and attach the lower links. Okay, the lower links are attached. Now we gotta attach the panhard rod. Okay, now we've got all the links attached, and the only thing left, well, I forgot to put the springs in. That should help. Let's put the springs in. Alright, now let's attach the rear shocks. And go on the side. Move on to the other side. Alright, and with that we have attached the rear axle. Take a look at that. Nice scale suspension. Really cool. That's how it's supposed to look. Let's go ahead and move on to the front axle. Okay. Moving on to the front axle. Let's get the springs out. Alright, here are the springs. We'll just put them on the perch. You'll notice I don't have a servo in there yet. I've got to get a different servo. Still messing around with different ones here. First things first, let's make sure that dry shaft is in phase. For me to do that, I'm going to figure out which direction these are. Okay. I want that facing this way. These right here, I believe, are M3 by 16s. So you're going to want M3 by 16s. One there. And one here. You need your M3 lock nuts. And that's the lower link mount for the front axle. Now we need to do the shocks and the panhard, as well as the steering link. But the steering link I don't have the servo yet, so we'll skip that for now. Let's go ahead and do the shocks first. Alright, now we're ready to attach the shocks onto the front axle. These shocks mount with these screws, and these are, let me measure these for you. These are M3 by 25s, and they do not go in the middle of this link mount here. They actually go on the outside. You won't be able to fit it on the inside of that link mount, so they go outside of the link mount. Like so, and then you secure them with the M3 nut. Alright, the shocks are mounted up to the front axle. See right there. Go ahead and mount the panhard to the chassis, and this is where you need that ball for the top of the panhard, and it goes like right there. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So here is the top of the panhard rod with that ball, pivot ball in there. You will be threading this screw into the panhard rod in the mount, so you'll need thread lock. Alright, aside from the drag link that I can't mount it because I don't have a servo, my servo is actually going to go this way, so it's going to turn like this. The front axle is done. Let's see if I can give you a better look. Yep. So this is how the panhard rod is mounted. See there. And that's how the front axle is mounted to this chassis. Let's give you a closer look of where everything goes. And you can see how my steering setup is a little bit different, and once again I'm doing that just because I need for this to clear the panhard mount when it's going to full left. So you can see here, this rod that used to hit this mount right here is now going underneath on full left. And that's why I have it both below the mount on the knuckle. Well, it turns out there actually might be an M3 nut for this panhard mount. I found a nut, and I think that is the remaining place where it would have gone. So that's where I put it. And that's about it for this part of the build series, putting together the front and rear axles. Once again, that's how they go together. As well as mounting it to the chassis. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for the next part of my RCRun Run80 build series. Thanks for watching.